Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we will start, actually we will finish chapter 6 of Holt and Davis. So we have covered from section 6.1 to 6.1 to 6.4. So 6.5 is about incentive compatible mechanisms. So what are incentive compatible mechanisms? Well, basically we have seen that if you have public goods, or you have externalities, or you have commons problem, the market doesn't work in the sense that basically the main problem is that selfish incentives are not aligned with social welfare. So the basic problem is the one that invisible hand fails. That is, if people act for their own personal benefit, it causes damage to society. And vice versa, if people act for the social good, then that is not their maximizing, that's not maximize personal welfare. So this whole area is actually, I think, fundamentally misguided. This is the wrong way to approach the problem. But what the problem, the way economists approach this problem before they gave up, is that they assume that being selfish is a central characteristic of human beings and nothing can be done about that. So then the question is, can we create rules such that everybody acts selfishly and still it leads to the social outcome? And basically you can improve things, but you cannot get. So like we studied last time, that with provision points you can get people to cooperate. And actually your own experiment, hopefully, which you did, you could get people to cooperate, and you could also break down the cooperation. So the question is, how can we design a mechanism such that everybody acts selfishly but it creates social welfare? This is the wrong question, because basically what we know is that human beings have two different ways of behaving. They behave in a different way with strangers, they behave in a different way in markets, and they behave in a different way in society. So the thing that one needs to do to solve the problem of the commons, which we will discuss, is to appeal to the social behavior of human beings and see, and this social behavior is not 100% and not constant. In some situations people are more friendly and cooperative, in other situations the same people will be less friendly and less cooperative. So how can we get people to behave socially? This should have been the question. This was not the question that was asked by the economists. Instead they asked how we can get selfish people, and they couldn't really find any answers. And the point is that the economists don't know about the social behavior of human beings. This is not part of their theory, because in the theory you start by saying that people are homo economicus, so that's taken as an axiom, and then everything is built upon that. So you can't change that. No, people don't always behave selfishly. So people can be generous, people can be cooperative, people can sacrifice their personal interest for the others, and we see it every day. So the idea that no, people must be selfish, this is the wrong idea. So now incentive compatible mechanisms are designed to see how you can get selfish people to act cooperatively. So basically this is the standard Lindahl optimum, as it's called. So the two curves at the bottom are the benefits that people get from the provision of goods. There are two people, one is L and one is H. L looks like a 1. So BL has relatively low amount of benefits from the public good, and BH has high benefits. If you look at the two bottom graphs, you can see that this is sort of the demand curve. As the provision increases, the marginal benefit decreases. So there are two different demand curves for these two different people. But of course, the public good has the property that you can't supply any. There's only one supply. So if you look at this quantity Q star, then the solid bar in the BL in the middle diagram, that's the amount of benefit derived by the low benefit consumer, and the dashed bar in the bottom diagram, that's the amount of benefit the high benefit consumer gets. And if you add those up, then at that level Q star, you get the marginal benefit is equal to the cost. The marginal cost is taken to be constant, and it's just the straight line. So you see that independently, neither of these people are willing to buy the public good because their entire demand curve lies below the cost. But if they combine, then at the level Q star, the marginal benefit of low is the solid bar, and so you get the optimal, which is the social optimal, and this is called the Lindahl optimal solution, because the marginal benefit is equal to the marginal cost. And the problem is that in this point, you want to make sure that the low cost person pays only the solid bar, and the high benefit person pays the thatched bar. And if that is so, then this is a perfectly good equilibrium, and it will maximize your social benefit. But there is a problem, and the problem is that if you ask people how much benefit you are getting, and we are going to charge you the amount of benefit, then there is incentive not to reveal your preference, not to reveal what you're doing. So according to the economist, everyone will always say zero. But this does not happen. So actually there has been debate between two polar sides. One says that no, people will reveal the preferences, and so there is no problem, and there is no such thing as free-rided problem because people are socially motivated. So that extreme is also not true. But the other extreme, that people will always say zero and they have no concept of social behavior, that's also not true. So the reality is somewhere in the middle, and nobody knows much about what the real behavior of human beings is. It's neither they are neither angels nor they are devils. So the Lindahl solution is based on, you announce the desired level of public good G, that this is what we want to produce. Everybody tells us that I will benefit this much, I will benefit this much, and so you calculate, is the marginal benefit equal to the cost? If not, you adjust, you provide more or less. So this will work perfectly as long as people reveal their correct demand. So suppose I say that we want to build parks, different people will, or roads, different people will benefit differentially. So everyone should reveal how much he will benefit, and then we will charge people according to how much benefit they derive. It's perfectly fair, but people might lie about how much benefit. They say, oh, I won't benefit anything from it. In fact, because they don't want to pay the price. So this is standard free riding problem. So this is why the Lindahl solution is not Nash equilibrium, because given that everybody else is paying to build the road, then your incentive is to say that I will not pay anything, although you derive a lot of benefit from it. So what can you do? Well, one of the most famous solutions to this problem is called the Groves-Ledyard mechanism. And I'm not going to discuss this in very great detail because it doesn't work basically. Otherwise there is a whole theory of it, and there's an appendix which does the mathematics. And in fact, typical public policy, public goods courses, you would go through all the mathematics and the proofs of this. But I just want you to be familiar with it. So here is the notation. Xi is the benefit that I derive from the good. It's the level of good, public good provision, Xi. And this is the amount that I want, not the benefit I derive. And the total amount of good supplied is just x1 plus x2 plus x3, etc. But it's useful to divide this. So that's the total supply is x, which is equal to xi, which is the amount that I want, and si, which is the amount that all the others want. So it's useful to divide the amount into the part that I control and the part that's controlled by others. So then here is the formula for the Groves-Ledyard. It says that take the total good, which is xi plus si, and take the marginal cost of production. We assume constant marginal cost, although the mechanism works in general also, and divide it by n, the total number of players. So everybody gets just 1 over n times the total cost of the good. That's one part. So that's an equal share. Then we adjust this by subtracting n times si, which is what the others want, and xi plus si, which is the total supply. So now if I increase my demand for the good, I have to pay a cost which is linearly increasing with x. And then I also get a gain which is n minus 2 times xi plus si squared. So one term is declining with x and one term is increasing with x. So this is my cost. So these two terms are balanced with each other in the sense that the theorem proves that I should correctly reveal my true preference, how much I want, which is in accordance with the benefits that I derive. So at that point my marginal cost and marginal benefit will be equal if this cost formula is used. So there is a complex mathematical theorem. You have to differentiate this with respect to x and try to maximize and then check that the incentives match. So basically with this incentive mechanism, what happens is that there is a Nash equilibrium created where everybody correctly reveals his preference and everybody is charged the correct price, which is in accordance to his preference. So would it work in reality? Several questions. First of all, this is a complex mechanism. Would people figure out that their optimal strategy is correct revelation of your selfish preference? We have seen that even in very simple problems, people miscalculate the optimum, so it's not clear that would work. So what one needs to do is to get people to learn this, and for that, you see, this is a problem with economic theory, that it assumes that by magic people immediately get to equilibrium. There is no learning. So if we try to do experiments, then we see that there is always learning. And this also creates a serious problem, and in the sense that we have been studying this whole book about how by repeating experiments people learn and experience and get to the equilibrium in some situations, some they don't. But basically a lot of effort of the experimental economist has been to show that people can learn how to get to equilibrium. But now, do these results apply to reality? It's very hard to say, because reality is continuously changing. The supply is changing every day, demand is changing. So you don't have that experience to do the learning to get to the 10th round of your oral double option where you will have convergence. So reality is always in disequilibrium. So in that case, equilibrium theory doesn't really have any meaning. So you have to study what happens in disequilibrium. That's something which economists don't do. So anyway, here we are continuing with this same strategy, that what if we give people a chance to learn. So the way that the experiments go is that I say, okay, we are going to apply this, we are going to supply this amount X. Now everybody can suggest a proposal that how they would like to change. So people said, say Xi, which is the amount that you want to change, and depending on the amount, you apply the formula to say, okay, now everybody submits their bids that this is what we would like. So people are, so then the experimenter calculates the cost by using the Groves-Ledyard formula and says, okay, this is what your tax bill will be. Now people look at their tax bill and they say, okay, and this is what the total amount supplied will be, because now the total amount supplied will also change according to. So he said, okay, everybody submitted their bids, this is what the total amount and this is what your tax bill. Now people look at this and they say, okay, I'm not quite happy with this, so let me change it again. So they change it according to, again, their preferences, that with this tax and with this amount, they say, okay, I want to change it again. And they keep changing until they converge. And convergence is determined by saying that if you are happy with what you are, then you just submit the same bid again. Okay, I'm happy with this level and I'm happy with this cost. So if everybody submits the same bid twice, then you are at the equilibrium, right? So we iterate the mechanism until you have 2 repeats. Now technically this could go on forever. So you say that, okay, there will be a terminal period. So we will have 10 rounds, and then in the 10th round either there is agreement, or we just say, okay, nobody wants anything and everybody gets 0. So kind of like ultimatum game. So what happens is that if we iterate, then we have problems, because now actually if people behave honestly, it might work, but people can behave strategically. So one person can, so in that case what happens is that there is lots of Nash equilibrium that emerge. How? Well, you see, one person can force things. He can say, okay, until the 9th round he just keeps changing his bid regardless of what. So now there is no convergence. Now in the 9th round, whatever is submitted, that's the only possibility. And either everybody repeats and they get some benefit, or they don't and then nobody gets anything. So you get to an ultimatum game. Now in that 9th round, almost anything can emerge if people are behaving strategically. And so almost everything will be a Nash equilibrium, because everything will be better than nothing. So this is theoretically a problem. Now, how can we solve that? We have to have a theory of how people behave, which we don't, because in this situation, maximization theory, equilibrium theory doesn't work. And then we have to have a theory of learning. How people behave is going to be too complex, because how I behave depends on how others will be behaving, whether they are going to be cooperative, whether they. So you can't really calculate that. So that means that basically the theory of maximization, which tells us how people behave, is useless in this. And there is no theory of disequilibrium, there is no theory of how people learn. So basically economic theory is completely worthless in this situation. So lab experiments can give us some information about what really happens, since economic theory doesn't tell us anything. So the Groves-Ledyard mechanism was tested in some things like the experiment that we have done, which was like voluntary contribution mechanism. And so first they did a session in which they got convergence to 0 contribution, so that everybody realizes that there's full free riding. Then they implemented the mechanism. They said, okay, now you can propose some amount, whatever you want. So everybody proposed some amount, then said, okay, this is the price you will have to pay. Do you agree? So then people did multiple rounds, and so after that you did get to convergence and efficient outcome was achieved. So in the initial experiments, the Groves-Ledyard mechanism was very successful. But later more experiments were done, and in these experiments, these mechanisms did work in the sense that free riding was stopped, there was contribution, but basically when you have complications, you see, when you have symmetry, everybody can easily calculate what the fair share is, but when you have complexity, different people have different costs, different benefits, it's hard to figure out what the... In that case, the Groves-Ledyard mechanism is supposed to disentangle this problem, and everybody should pay exactly how much they are benefiting so that you get to the Lindahl optimal. So it turns out this doesn't work in complicated environments. In complicated environments, you don't get to a place where everybody is playing according to their marginal benefit. Why this happens, we don't know. But you definitely get benefit. The Groves-Ledyard mechanism works. You get a more efficient solution. There is public good provided, but there are many things. I mean, people are not paying exactly according to their benefit. Some people are paying more, some people paying less. There are issues of justice. Sometimes the outcome achieved is not equally fair to all people. So all of these things happen, but it works in the basic sense that you do get provision, you do eliminate free riding, but you don't get the efficient solution. So there was this was just a theoretical experiment in the labs, but it was tried out in the field. See, in America they have lots of public television channels. So on the public television, they work by, they don't work on commercial basis. So they have to fund their programs by some other way. Usually they don't show commercially viable programs, and they don't, so they have science, information, education, other types of documentaries, and they don't have too many ads. That is the main source of revenue. So then they have many types of other types of funding. So they have to decide what programs are we going to produce, because in the commercial sector you produce the program which has the highest ratings, because that's what will attract the highest ads. But now you don't have the market driving behavior, so you have a budget. Now you have 20 different programs, so what are you going to produce? This is the question, because you can produce the most deadliest, boring program ever, and there's no, you have a fixed budget. So what they did was, in order to, and there are many different TV stations, they all have their budgets, so they should pool their resources. So a very simple mechanism was devised that, okay, we have a proposed list of 100 programs, and there are 10, 20 different stations, TV stations. So all of them should submit a checklist that, okay, these are the programs that we want to produce. So then the center gets the list of all the programs that the different stations want to produce, and then it is a very simple mechanism. So if there is a program that only one station wants to produce, it has to pay the full cost. If there is a program which all the stations to produce, then everyone pays 1/n. And if there is a station which only program which 3 stations checked, then each of them gets to pay 1/3 of the cost. So it says, okay, this is the list, and this is what people want to produce, and this is your cost. So then the second round comes around, and people say, okay, this is too much or this is too little. If you check a program, and if a lot of other people also check that program, then the cost will be less. But if you check a program and nobody else wants to produce, then you will have to pay all. So then you look at the menu now, and you look at the cost, and you drop the most expensive programs. And maybe if you see that the program is popular and other people are producing, you can be part of that. So you change your choices. Now this thing worked And once you have convergence, that is, everybody sticks with their choice. If they don't change their previous choice, then you have convergence. So this actually was used and actually worked very well. So again, the economists looked at this mechanism and they said, okay, theoretically this has many deficiencies. For example, it divides things equally, but it may be that there is somebody who wants the program more than the others. He's willing to pay 75% of the cost if the other party wants to pay 25%. So they devised a more complicated mechanism to correct these theoretical deficiencies. But when they tested it in experiments, it didn't work very well. And that's because they don't really have a very good idea of human behavior and motivations. So the theory didn't help. This very simple mechanism works quite well. So basically the point is that of all the experiments conducted, there is a very severe mismatch between reality and theory. The experiments do not lead to the predicted results, and people do not behave as theory predicts. And problems which the theory says is these are very important problems don't really matter. And there are lots of things which experiments show that these matter a lot, but the theory says that they are unimportant. For example, communication, discussion. And so basically economic theory lacks understanding of how people behave, what motivates them, and how they learn. And these are the things that... So all of your incentive compatible mechanism design is about assuming that people are motivated only by money. And since this assumption is false, so it doesn't work. And you can create artificial situations where you just put everybody in a separate booth. You don't allow them to talk so that the social mechanism doesn't come into play. And then you artificially incentivize them that the only thing you are here for is to make points or to make money. Then okay, then they will behave like this. But that doesn't mean that's like real human behavior. In any real world problem, people will think, are we getting together to build a hospital or are we building businesses, as we happened? So they will behave differently in the real world because they have different types of social concerns. So that's why this basically incentive design mechanism, because it didn't work, the theory didn't predict anything, this was basically dropped. And in the 80s it was very strong, but after that people stopped doing these experiments. So the next topic is about externalities, and the basic idea is that there is something called the tragedy of the commons. Very famous article in which it says that suppose we have a pasture where everybody can graze their sheep, so this is common land. So now the correct thing to do is for everyone to be a little bit careful and make sure that the grass will regrow. But no one person has any particular control over this, and so everybody has incentive to overgraze, and ultimately the pasture will be destroyed. Same thing happens in fishing. If you overfish, then there is no more fish for the future. But no one person can ensure that there is no overfishing. The biggest problem is the climate change problem. Everybody is producing pollution, and the point is to reduce it to some manageable level. But any one country says, okay, I will not reduce, as long as the other people reduce, it will automatically benefit. So there is a problem of how to get equal sacrifice, and that is proven very hard to solve. Now, so the basic problem is that your private incentive mismatches the social incentive. Now what has happened is that in reality, human beings have worked out many solutions to these problems, and they have managed to solve this incentive problem by using social mechanisms. So one very standard line is that this tragedy of commons is just an excuse for privatization or for government takeover. So this is not the right way to view the problem. There are other ways to look at the problem which are more beneficial and more fruitful. Human beings are social, and we can learn how to live together, and we have centuries of thousands of years of experience at living in society and making sacrifices for each other and working to putting aside our personal interests in order to work for the community. So, okay, so this is the next slide. We did this, and now there is an experiment which is described in detail in the textbook. I will not go over those details because they match perfectly to what we have already done in another context. So there are formulas and things, but it's very similar. Basically, the issue is that you are exploiting a common resource. There are three equilibrium. One is one where where you treat it as a monopoly. Everybody says, okay, what's the maximum benefit that we can all get together as a group? So that's your efficiency maximization. That has your minimum fishing. You can say that the tokens are the permit to pollute or permit to fish from a common pool. So if everybody gets together and jointly decides the maximum which will benefit everybody the most, as long as if there's overfishing, it causes damage to everybody. So then you get to 36 tokens as the solution, the minimum level. If you say that, okay, let's allow the Nash equilibrium to emerge, so then everyone will try to fish more or pollute more, and you get to 64. This is the point at which everybody is maximizing their individual benefits, assuming the others are constant. So in this situation, if all other players play their same maximizing strategy, then my maximizing strategy will be 64. The last one, 72, this is your like your perfect competition solution, where I maximize mine assuming that it has no impact on the other people's behavior. So just like you take prices as given. So this is the largest amount of production, and so these are the three different equilibrium which could emerge. One emerges if the people act completely cooperatively. In the second Nash equilibrium, if people are aware of each other and behave strategically, but so this is non-cooperative Nash equilibrium. And the third equilibrium emerges if people are just blindly maximizing their own without regard to anything about what others are doing, which is what happens in perfect competition, where you maximize your own private function without regards to what others are doing. So there are these three predictions now. A game was played to assess which of these would emerge. And so basically the results show, 100% is at the top line. That is what the monopolist would be able to extract. If the people were cooperating, were behaving socially, you would be at the top line. So nobody is near the top line except for a few by mistake. So basically the Nash equilibrium is the second place where people are aware of each other and strategically responding. But even that is not achieved, and typically people are below Nash equilibrium, which means they are overfishing, and they are not even acting strategically with respect to each other. They are just doing their private maximization without any regard for others, which leads to damage to everybody, actually, more damage. I mean, even if they were aware that, okay, there are other people and they will be behaving strategically, they would be at the Nash equilibrium, which gets you about 40% of the efficient solution. But typically people are even below that. So there were experiments with experienced players and inexperienced players, and the first one shows that typically people, whether they are experienced or they are inexperienced, they are below Nash equilibrium. The top line is the inexperienced players. They are actually closer to Nash equilibrium than the experienced players. The experienced players towards the end go even below the 0% efficiency, which is the competitive equilibrium. So their massive overfishing is going on with the experienced players. So it is not working out according to theory at all. The second line was, again, there's an effect which theory predicts does not happen, but from the experiment they saw that this might be the case, that if you have a lot of tokens, which means that you have a lot of different choices, you may have only a limited amount of choice. I can fish 1 hour or 2 hours, so then there's not that much variation. Or you can say that I can fish 1 hour or 2 hour, 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. So then you have a large amount of options available. So would that, according to theory, it makes no difference. I mean, you will, but they saw that people have difficulty making decisions, and so the next one, the token endowment effects, test the situation where you have 10 tokens in one and 25 tokens in other. This just expands your range of action. So the 25 tokens actually cause a lot of damage, in the sense that you are further away from Nash equilibrium, you are doing a lot of overfishing in the first, and typically throughout the game the 25 token people were doing badly. I guess it means just that it takes you time to learn behavior, the optimal behavior, more time if you have more choices. And so ultimately in the end there was convergence to the Nash equilibrium for both, but so learning matters. Another experiment like this was based on a situation where you had externalities, so you are doing pollution. So your private cost function is the supply function, and the social cost is much higher because of the negative externalities. And so the supply and demand, so this was done by an oral double auction, and it converged to the so-called competitive equilibrium, where people simply ignore the social cost, even though this is harmful to everybody, including the person who is producing, because the social cost is inflicted on everybody. But they only look at their private incentive. Everybody maximizes their private incentive in the oral double auction, and the overall social cost is just neglected. So this shows the standard economic theory method, that basically externalities cause a lot of harm. If externalities were taken into account, then the price should have been much higher and the production should have been much lower, but it didn't happen in the experiment with oral double auction, because oral double auction is most favorable to competitive. Now again, what lesson do we learn from this? The lesson that we learn is that if we allow people to talk, then this will not happen. But if you use oral double auction, then this kind of thing will happen. So the issue is, how do we fix this problem? So now we see that if we do have externalities, then this does cause damage. So there are a number of things which have been done. As we have said, non-binding communication is helping. Actually, you can have binding communication as well. You can have people try to make treaties, and it works quite well. Actually, in small games, communication works very well. You can often get to the social maximum. The Grove's Ledyard mechanism has been proposed, and it works well in simple situations, but it doesn't work well in complex situations. The same thing is true of communication. When there's a clear, fair and equitable solution which everybody can see, then this thing works, communication works very well. If the situation is complex, where people have asymmetric costs and benefits and different people are of different sizes, then you have much more difficulty reaching an agreement because you don't know exactly what is fair. The provision point solution with payback works well. Again, that's true in simple situations, not necessarily so in complex. And but of course, provision points doesn't work in the commons situation. You don't have any natural analog. So if you have overfishing, etc., it's not clear how to set a provision point. But the method that is preferred by the economist is to give property rights. If somebody owns the commons and he sells the right to fish, then he will be able to manage the commons problem will not arise because so there was a experiment again by Plot. One was that people can trade with each other. There's a total quantity restriction, and now you can either agree to, and you can allocate this among yourselves as you like. So you have to reach agreement on the total amount of fishing is going to be this much. Now you come to an agreement as to who will get what, and if you agree, then you get that, and if you don't agree, nobody gets anything. So that is the top graph, and as you can see, it doesn't work all that well because the price which different people are paying fluctuates a lot, efficiency is low, and the problem arises because there is a bounded amount of time in which you have to reach agreement, and so towards the end people are frantically coming to agreement, not necessarily the best one, not necessarily the most efficient one. As opposed to this, there was the pollution permits, where different people have, and you have the same amount, but different people are given different permits, and then they trade among each other, and then the price of the pollution sets down nicely, and it works according to the economic theory. So this is again Plot. Plot is always trying to prove that economic theory works, so all of his experiments lead to that results. So it is true in certain situations economic theory does provide accurate predictions, but whether these situations are common in the world, that's a separate matter. Okay, so the summary of this externalities and commons is that these do create major problems in the real world, and the different types of institutional mechanism can solve this to some extent, but there are many complications, unexpected equilibria, monopolies can occur, and injustice can occur. This is something that's very important, that's neglected by standard theory. There are some articles which deal with, there's this book, I've forgotten the title. There's a whole book on ethics and economics and justice. So according to economic theory, different people have different costs. So basically what should happen is that the rich countries should export all their garbage to the poor countries because they can afford. So this doesn't seem like an ethical solution. It's just penalizing the poor for being poor. So, but let's send all the pollution to the poorer countries because they cannot afford to pay as much to get rid of the problem. So it's according to the market norms, that's the efficient solution because it maximizes the surplus. But is this really the right criteria to look at? Most people would disagree, except for economists who have been trained to think that the money is the only criteria. Another problem which is not handled well by neither these experiments nor these mechanisms is the dynamic externality, that what happens in the long run. This is because basically in the long run, for example, this is what's happening today to the atmosphere, because the market that the economists imagine doesn't exist, because what we are doing is we are killing off the happiness of the future generation. It doesn't exist to bargain with us that allow us to live so that and we will pay you something. So there is no market, so we are free to destroy the future of the planet because there is no benefit for us to not doing so. So this is a major issue which cannot be resolved by markets or licenses or permits. So again, the solution for that is in the social mechanisms of humanity, but those economists don't know anything about. So the last item on this chapter is an interesting one, which is called voting in agendas. So this is also about public good. Some decision has to be made by the group as a whole. So one way to do that is to just vote on the options. So now we have certain set of problems which emerges, which is called the Condorcet Paradox. So the Condorcet, suppose that we have options A, B, C and D. A is called by definition a Condorcet winner if it wins in every pairwise election in a majority. See, typically you have pluralities, maybe 30 people are voting for A and 20 people are voting for B and 50 people are voting for C. But there is no majority, meaning more than 50% for any option. So instead of having a vote in which everybody can vote for anything, if we do just a pairwise voting, A against B, A against C, A against D, and B against C. So if A wins every pairwise election, A is better than B, A is better than C, A is better, then A is called the Condorcet winner. So to give an example of a Condorcet winner, suppose that A is favorite of 10 people and B and C and D, so we have 9 votes each. So there are 9 3s are 27, 37 total people. 10 people like A, 9 people like B, 9 people like C and 9 people like D. Now what will be the Condorcet winner? No, we cannot say. That's the point. We cannot say who will be the Condorcet winner as yet, because what happens is that what will happen in a pairwise vote of A versus B depends on how the C and D people vote. So their top preference is no longer available to them. So now how they choose between B and A makes a difference. So now if both C and D like B much better than A, then B will win in a pairwise election of A and B, right? Because the C and D will all vote for the B. Now they're first. So A will be a Condorcet winner. I just want to illustrate. If suppose that C and D are equally divided, the C people all prefer B and the D people all prefer A, then 9 votes will go to B and 9 votes will go to A, and then A will be the winner. And similarly, if we have similar type of equal divide, then when A and C are chosen and the remaining parties are equally divided between these two, then again A will win, and similarly for D. But this equal division is very, very sharp condition. If there is unequal division, then A may not be a Condorcet winner, and in that situation there may be no Condorcet winner. So now I want to show the Condorcet paradox, that all individual preferences are transitive, but the group preference may not be transitive. So if we have a vote, and so there's a very interesting example to make it realistic. Suppose we are voting as a community on public school taxes. How much taxes should we give in order to finance the public schools? Now there are three groups, and let's suppose there are just three people, or we can say each one has 1,000 people in his constituency. It doesn't matter. So we can take three people. So there is the rich people, and they have these preferences. The rich people say, we are never going to put our children in public school. We are going to go to Beacon House. So we don't want to pay any taxes for public school. So they want low taxes is their best choice, and middle taxes is their second best, and high taxes is their least preferred. Now then there is the middle class. The middle class says that we really can't afford to put our children into into private school, so we would like to have the best possible public school system. So we want to have high taxes so that we can get the best possible taxes. But if we can't have high taxes, if we can't have an excellent public system, then we will send our children to private school. So in that case, we would like to have low taxes so that we have money to send our children to public school. And the worst case is medium, where we have high taxes and we have bad public schools and not the best public schools. And so we can't send our children to public school. We have to pay high taxes, and we also have to pay for private school education. The poorest people, the low income class, would like to, you see, there are basically two types of educational systems. There is the airplane, jet, and the presidential system, and they say we want our children to just get a good education. We can't pay too much high taxes, so we would like to have middle taxes and an average education, not the superstar education that the middle class wants. But if we can't have that, then we would like, we don't like to pay taxes, but our children's education is so important that we would like to have high taxes and good education. And the worst option is low taxes, which means that our children get bad education, like is happening in here. Actually, nobody likes that, and people will be very happy to pay more taxes if they could see results in terms of their having better public schools. So this is their preference. So all three have different preferences. So now what will happen if we have a low versus middle? So we look at now the pairwise elections in the Condorcet. So suppose we had a vote on should there be low tax or should there be middle tax. Then the rich class and the middle class, they prefer low taxes to middle taxes. The rich class prefers low classes, and the middle class says that middle taxes are no good for us because our schools will be Urdu medium, and we don't want good Urdu medium schools, we want the best schools. So the rich and the middle class will vote for the low taxes. The low income class will vote for the middle taxes, and the low income will lose because there are two votes for the. So L wins in this. Now suppose we try low taxes versus high taxes. So then the rich people vote for the low taxes, but now the middle class and the lower class votes for the high taxes. Both of them prefer high tax. So this time the high tax will win. And suppose we have middle versus H. Then both the rich people and the poor people prefer middle tax to high taxes, but the middle class prefers high tax. So now again the middle will win. So in three different pairwise elections, three different choices emerge. So the social preferences are not transitive in pairwise choices. So we have low is preferred to middle, middle is preferred to high, and high is preferred to low in majority vote. So we have a cycle. This is called the Condorcet Paradox, and most people don't understand this Condorcet Paradox. So in fact, there were some elections in Turkey, which has lots of different minority, and after the election, people were very puzzled that, as a group we prefer X to Y, and then we prefer Y to Z, and then we prefer Z to Y. We can't make up our minds. So actually there's no collective mind which is making choices. Different people have different choices, and according to different politics, different groups will win. And you cannot talk about the group mind, because there's no group mind. So now this leads to a very interesting option, which is called agenda choice, which says that suppose that the status quo is middle taxes. This is what has been happening. So we put a vote with all the 3 people or the 3,000 people are sitting there, and we say we are sitting in council, we're considering, should we change the system that we are, should we go to high taxes or should we go to low taxes? So suppose we say that, okay, first we will vote on the following options, that we will take, either we consider status quo and higher taxation, or we consider status quo and lower taxation. So we are going to do this in 2 stages instead of doing a pairwise election. So first we are going to consider whether we should move upwards, greater than or equal to, or whether we should move downwards. So what will happen then at the next stage? So one of these choices will be eliminated, either the L or the H will be eliminated. Then we have a pairwise choice, and then we will have again. So now what will happen depends on whether people are sincerely voting, that is, they vote their true preferences, or they look to the final stage, they look to see what is happening, and then they say that, okay, my proposal has no chance of winning, so I will switch to the other proposal in the first round, even though this is not my preference. So that's called strategic voting. So for the moment, let's avoid strategic voting and think about sincere voting. So what will happen in this situation? The rich will prefer middle or low taxes. The middle class and the lower class prefer high or medium to low. So in the first round, high and medium will win over low and medium. But in the second round, when high and medium is put to the vote, then the rich people and the poor people prefer M. So medium will be selected, so status quo will remain the same. It will remain exactly where it is. Now the thing is that this same process can be done for any of the 3 choices. If you start with H as status quo and say, okay, let's vote on the first choice for H and M versus H and L. So eliminate either the medium or the low choice in the first round. Then you will find that rich and the low income people prefer H and L, either high or low. So the middle choice will get eliminated in the first round, but in the second round, rich and middle class will prefer high taxes, so that will get chosen. So if the one that you want to protect, you want to vote on last. And similarly, if you make L as the status quo and choose on whether we should eliminate H or M, then in the first round the high taxes will be eliminated. In the second round, the middle taxes will be eliminated, and you will remain at L. So regardless of where you start at status quo, by agenda choice you can actually get to any of the 3 options. So this kind of manipulation is often possible when pluralities exist. Things depend on the second and third. You see, it's not my top preference which determines what's happening. It's my choice between my second and third preference and how that is behaving. So the question is, does this work in reality? Voter preferences are not known. How agenda is set has different rules. The economists don't believe that this will happen because they have hyper-rationality models which say that people look through to the end and always make the strategic maximizing choice. So they will not be deceived by this kind of thing. So Levine and Plot did a real-world experiment. Actually, it was true. They were part of a flying club with many members, and the flying club was trying to decide how to buy a fleet of planes, a new fleet of planes, which would be small planes. So actually the majority, not the majority, but there was a strong and big group which said that we should have a middle-sized fleet, all consisting of small, middle-sized planes of the same type. Against this, there were some people who preferred a small fleet, and other people who wanted a large fleet. So Plot and Levine were given the choice to construct the agenda for voting when all the members were meeting. So they wanted the large fleet. So they constructed the agenda in such a way that it would lead to the large fleet. So basically you have 3 dimensions on which people were voting. One was the cost. Large fleet was the most expensive, so it's the worst, WMB. Middle size was medium expensive, and small fleet was the best in terms of cost. Then there was variety. So large fleet was the best in terms of having a large variety of planes, and the middle sized fleet was medium, and the small fleet was the worst. And then there was equipment options, which what kind of things should we have? Radars, should we have expensive avionic equipment, should be simple hang gliders with no equipment. So this was where they played the game so as to create, they said, okay, the options they put on the table was such that the large fleet they said that because the large fleet is expensive, we are going to cut down on the options and simplify. So it was mid-size fleet. You had the largest range of options, so it was the best, and the small fleet was the worst. So now if you think that different people are voting according to different, some people are only concerned with cost, some people are only concerned with variety, and some people are only concerned with options. So if you think of this, then you have standard Condorcet paradox, and if you set the voting agenda correctly, you can reach whichever is the status quo. So basically, if you put the cost out of consideration, because that's the worst one and you will get defeated, so you put the cost vote to the last, and you first vote on whether you should have variety or whether you should have equipment options. Then between whatever remains, if you go for the cost, you will just not quite how it works, because cost is worst on that one. There is anyway, I don't want to go into the details, but what happened was that they managed to get their choice selected, even though the chairman of the committee was on to their game, and he tried very hard to intervene and fix things, but he could not succeed because the agenda was there. Basically what the chairman wanted to do was to either to disrupt the agenda or to say that you should vote strategically, think what's going to happen, but he did not succeed, and they got their vote. And later it was clear that this was not the Condorcet winner, and in fact in a Condorcet election the mid-size fleet would have won. This was happened by post-election tallying of preferences. So what are the conclusions? That misallocations occur in direction predicted by theory, commons are overused, free riding is common, externalities are abused, but these things don't happen in line with economic theory. So economic theory is not there are many factors which are irrelevant by theory but which are important. If we repeat the game, people get experience, this makes a difference. The group size is very important. The margin private contribution ratio matters, even though according to theory, as long as it's less than 1, it makes no difference. But actually, I mean, how much skin people have in the game, how much there is also experiments show that there is in large groups you expect theoretically to see more free riding, but actually in many experiments you don't see a lot of free riding. So that's a puzzle people don't understand, because economists don't understand, because they don't understand the social behavior of human beings. Some mechanisms do work. Provision plus give back works to solve the problem in the voluntary contribution mechanism, in the public goods problem, and in the other externalities and commons problem. Property rights does tend to solve the problem. Another way that people have thought about it is to use licensing and permits and sale of permits, and this works, but it has mixed results. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it can lead to inefficiencies. So there is no clear answer. Now, to end this, there are 2 experiments that I want to run to show some of these problems. So one of these is going to be just a virtual experiment, and that is, I'm just going to go through the experiment, because actually this is a situation which we all have a lot of familiarity with, so we will be able to follow. So this is actually a classroom experiment. So we are now as teachers, we are going to use this experiment and run this experiment, and you can see what will happen. The other experiment will actually do. So this is classroom activity to explain the problem of the commons. So here we imagine that it's a hot day, and the classroom teacher puts on that table over there a large jug of lemonade, but it is covered so that you don't know how much there is, and he puts lots of free cups, and he puts a big sign there saying, free drinks, thanks for being such a great class. So as the students come in, they pour themselves a drink, and there is a handout which will ask students to write. So what do you think will happen? So there's technically there are small cups, and technically everybody can get enough, but what will happen, especially if it's a hot day? Yeah?
Everybody will try to have a bigger cup.
Yes, that's right. Everybody will try to get a bigger cup. So set up experiment. Before the students enter the classroom, fill the jug, tighten the lid, tape on the sign before securing the jug, so that the students can't look inside to see how much it has. So the overall amount is not known. Make sure there are obviously more than enough cups. Or open the soft drink bottles and pour it into several different glasses of different sizes. Place the drinks into the cups where the students will see them as they enter the classroom, and it says that if the students are coming in and they are hesitating, encourage them, take them, so that the game starts. Okay, this is teacher instructions. What will happen? If you don't see them on their own, encourage the first few students to take a drink and they'll go on with normal pre-class. The likely outcome is that the first students will pour themselves big drinks using the largest cups, and the drink will run out or become very small well before all students have a chance to fill their glasses. So this is the likely outcome, and this shows the problem of the commons. So start the class by asking, why wasn't there enough for everyone? And accept a variety of answers. Some people will say, oh, that's because the first people were greedy. And the first people say, no, we didn't see how much there was. So now, so there will be some discussion. Why wasn't there enough? Some people will say there was not enough. So you will show that no, if everybody takes a small cup, then there is enough for everybody. But people took big cups. So then in the discussion we come to the issue of who owns the drink. So initially it belonged to me, but after I put the sign, then it belongs to everybody, and there's no clear indication that who is. So it's collective ownership. So why did the drink run out? Because there was nobody had any incentive to save some, or to wait and let other people drink. There was an incentive to get a large drink now for the fear that there wouldn't be any left later. So this is self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think that other people are going to, and you can see that if there is a limited amount of food at a wedding or a party, then people make a grab and they mass their plates to the maximum because they think that they fear that it's going to run out. But if there is so much food, then everybody is relaxed and they take. Yes?
So what if besides the drink, what if there was tea or coffee? Still people take large cups. तो सर एक हैबिट होता है ना सर, उसका भी तो आप में होता है.
Those are, that wouldn't demonstrate our problem. We want to do an experiment in which show the students how the commons problem works. So in this experiment we would show. Okay, so the text, the experiment write-up says sometimes it can happen that the drink is shared equitably. So you have to take care of that. What happens when there is a strong leader in the class and he takes control? And he says, okay, you get this one. So if the students have a class representatives and he's watching what's going on, he says, okay, you just take this. No, you can't have two glasses. Because he sees. So if there is some leadership, so Elinor Ostrom showed that if you have in small groups and with face-to-face transactions, you can easily avoid the problem. So if the class is together and there's a jug and everybody sees what's there will be no problem in sharing it. The problem arises because you don't allow the social dimension to work. Alright, now we are going to play the real game. So here I have a box of chocolates. In this box it is written that there are, everybody take out pencil and paper and nobody should be able to see what the other people are doing. There are 24 units of candy, Cadbury. It's a good chocolate. Now, nine students, all of class, yeah. So there are 24 pieces, everybody knows that. No, there's no communication, no signaling, everybody should, obvious desk, you come in the front. I don't want two people sitting on the same desk, one of the people should come to the front. So now, you have to write down the number of chocolate pieces that you want from this. But there are some rules. As long as the total number of pieces, add up all the pieces, is less than 24 or 24, is feasible, then everybody will get the chocolates. If there's more, nobody gets anything. But in addition, I am going to offer 1,000 rupees to the one who has the highest number, and 500 to the second highest number. And this will be shared equally. If a lot of people have high numbers, then they will all get their share. So now, think about it and write down. Yeah.
Out of 24,
Yeah.
repeat कैसे
Okay, here's the thing. That you get to write down a number of candies that you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, maximum 4, because nobody can get more than that. Huh? 1, 2, 3 or 4. These are your 4 choices you have to write down. Now, we will, after everybody writes down their name and their number, I will add up all the numbers, so that what is the total class demand for chocolate. If the total class demand is less than 24, then everybody will get what they demanded, and the highest number will get the prize of 1,000 rupees. And the second highest number will get the prize of 500 rupees. If there are multiple highest numbers, they will share the first prize.
And sir, if the add up the sum is greater than 24,
Then nobody gets anything.
बॉक्स ओपन नहीं करना पड़ेगा
क्यों?
24 से ऊपर ही होना होगा
Alright. No discussion, no talking. Everybody will write down what they want.
सिंगल राउंड होगा या कितने राउंड?
Just one round. There's only one round. No, don't look at each other. No communication. No. Think. लिख लिया सब लोगों ने, सोच लिया. Everybody raise their hands if you have written down a number. उमर कियानी, and आपने भी लिख लिया. Everybody has written down number. Okay. आपने कितना लिखा? 3, 5,
2
7,
3
10.
2
Asma.
2,
12. Umar.
4
12 plus 4 is 16. आपका? 18. Oh, you're making
4
22.
2
Bravo. Yes?
24
24 हो गया. हाँ. हाँ? कितना? Wait. Now.
दो लोग 4 हैं और दो लोग 3
Okay, wait. Now I have to see. I have to make sure that this is correct. So I am going to distribute 3. इसमें actually 23 होंगे, तो इसमें अगर if this runs out, then everybody gets it.
Sir, आप यहाँ पे calculate 24 से कीजिए. Sir, I can get another one.
Fail by chance बस
That's 2. Not supposed to happen. ये क्या है? 2. अच्छा 2 थे. Oh, अच्छा right. हमारे कितने थे? थोड़ा ये वाह, तुमने तो खराब कर दिया काम. 3 लिख देते तो क्या होता तुम्हारा? अच्छा, अब क्या 4 किसके हैं? 1 2
ये भी है
3 किसके हैं? 3 के 2 हैं. तो
4 भी 2
4 भी 2 है, 3 भी 2 है.
So I got change.
ये लो, मेरे पास भी चाहिए. मैंने कहा था ये कहीं नहीं जाने वाली चाहिए. ओह अच्छा, तुम दोनों का तो बांटना पड़ेगा. हाँ, उसके भी शायद नहीं, मेरे पास नहीं होती.
थैंक यू सर.
अच्छा, तो ये एक्सपेरिमेंट तो फेल हो गया हमारे इंस्ट्रक्शंस में. लेट्स सी. I will read you the lesson plan anyway, so that we get idea of how this is supposed to go.
चॉकलेट खा सकते हैं वैसे?
हाँ खा सकते हैं. शेयर नहीं करनी, इतनी मेहनत से जीती है. Alright, so I'm going to go through the yes, there it is. This is the discussion for the game that we just played. Alright, so now after playing the game, these are the debriefing questions. What was your thinking in making your claim? So this is actually was supposed to play with the M&M chocolate. So some of the answers. So what were you thinking? We can now, since we played the game, we can ask.
Sir, equally distribute the whole.
Equal, हाँ नहीं हो सकता. 24 थे. There were 9 students. So at 9 times 3 is 27. 2.6 हाँ.
तो benchmark 2 और 3 2 और
हाँ.
3 करेंगे तो.
सही है. तो आपने कैसे सोचा?
सर मैं सिर्फ क्योंकि 27 वाला था टोटल,
हाँ.
अगर 3 से करें
हाँ.
तो मेरा ख्याल था कि 4 रखना ठीक नहीं है.
ठीक नहीं है.
ठीक नहीं है.
हाँ.
तो 4 तो 3 रखना चाहिए.
हाँ.
क्योंकि उसमें कुछ लोग तो 2 भी आएंगे.
सही. अच्छा, तो तुमने कितना रखा था? 3 रखा था. So he anticipated that other people will play 2, so he chose 3. आपने क्या किया?
सर मैंने 2 किया था.
हाँ, you chose 2.
2.6 बना था तो 2 और 3 होना था, तभी सर
हाँ.
कह रहे ना हम below 20.
हाँ, so you followed his idea के if everybody asks for 3, then it will surely go over. और किसी की कोई रीजनिंग? यस.
मैंने 2 इसलिए किया था कि अगर 2 से ज्यादा किया हो सकता है ये ना हो, एक्सपेरिमेंट ना हो,
हाँ.
तो इस वजह से चॉकलेट नहीं मिली.
सही है. So all of the 2 people were actually making social sacrifices. They knew that the 2.6 is the average, and they said that if we go above average, then nobody will get anything. So let me sacrifice for the sake of the group. So actually, they should get the prize,
Yes, sir.
right? That's for you to settle afterwards. सही है. Note that these people have given up on the prize and are more interested in what they perceive to be fair. Obviously, when you say 2, then you are giving up on the prize. So, and they are going for fairness. मुझे तवक्का नहीं थी वैसे. She is always being extremely selfish. तो बाकी सारे गेम्स में तो इसने इस तरह से बिहेव नहीं किया था. She was always like, हाँ मैं भी नहीं, तुमने तो चॉकलेट ही लिया ना, प्राइस तो इसने किया ही नहीं.
सर इंसेंटिव था ना इसमें.
इंसेंटिव क्या था? चॉकलेट. मगर वो एक और इससे बड़ा इंसेंटिव था ना. That was the bigger incentive. 3 पे तो प्राइस मिल गई ना. Thread, हाँ, thread भी था. सही है. Alright, so what about the Umar Kiani? What was your reasoning?
सर सेम मेरा ये था कि सब लोग 2-2 करेंगे.
हाँ.
I will do 4. सिंपल है जैसे, क्योंकि मैंने भी काउंट भी किया कि सबने 2-2 किए तो 9 2 18 होते हैं.
हाँ.
6 के आप मार्जिन से आप खेल सकते हैं. So I just did 4. Some simple calculation.
Those intent on the price will consider that what they considered the total number in the bag and what they thought others were likely to do. Why did the total claim exceed the total number? This was the expected outcome. How did the rules of the game encourage this outcome? Because the total game exceeded because the rules of the game encourage people to think of the immediate benefit, which could be only gained by the 3 people. मैंने तो first और second रखी थी, इसमें third prize भी थी. So हमारे game में actually if it was a large class, then very likely it would have gone like this. And so the core question is, who owned the bag? Property rights are unclear. So यानी इसमें solution ये है कि you might so basically now the question is, and you think about this as the ocean and the fish in the ocean. So if we make somebody the owner, and then people can get according to some defined rules like the market rules, then there would be no problem of overfishing. So there are different rules. Anything within 200 miles of my borders belongs to me as a fishing right, or there is 20 miles. So anyway, most of the ocean is common property. Now nobody owns the fish, so there is a lot of overfishing going on. Suppose fishermen know that the stock of fish is declining and fishery will collapse. How will they change their behavior? Well, as long the solution can only be found in a common social consensus. If there is no social consensus, then there is no benefit to the world from my restricting my capture. So, what is the cost to each fisherman of conserving? It is the income that I have had so there are individual there are many ways you can sell a license for the right to fish, and then you can make sure that there is only enough licenses. Actually, I saw a video where there was these small fish that they go to the Arctic and they come back, and you are only allowed to fish for 1 hour in the whole year, apparently. And there are these big trawlers, and in this 1 hour they catch millions of tons of fish. So otherwise the whole thing would be wiped out, and the whole species would be wiped out, and the whole ecological cycle will be disturbed. So you can have this, that there's fishing season, or there are licenses to fish, or there are fishing rights assigned. So these are all different ways of handling the problem of overfishing. So basically there's a lot of material and literature on this issue. Like there's the Kyoto Protocol, which I had planned to run a game on, which in which you have to negotiate for, you represent a different country, and you are all trying to come to an agreement that will limit the amount of carbon that is released. But carbon is released when cars are driven, when you are anything, and whenever you use energy, you release carbon. So if you say, okay, Pakistan mein energy band kar do, they will release a little carbon, but there will be a huge cost to the economy. So now the question is, within the countries, how do we negotiate so that everybody agrees to? So there is a lot of insights in this literature that emerged. But basically the thing that I want to say here is that the discussion is not solely dominated by monetary issues. There are other issues, and also different ways of thinking about the problem lead to different types of solutions. So we will discuss some of this next time. Maybe I'll mail a reading about this. Oh yes, one thing I wanted to ask you was, how did your games go?